So welcome everyone to August. Tomorrow is August 1st. So that is the triple conjunction of Mars, Uranus, and Rahu, the north node of the moon. This is the one we've been talking about a lot in astrology for months now. It's kind of, I think, in a way, the pivotal time in the year, but I don't necessarily think that something will happen on the day itself, tomorrow, the 1st. Although, maybe Tuesday, the 2nd, might bring some things that are more volatile because it's Tuesday and it's Mars's day. And it maybe is good to be aware of that. But really, unless you have something going on in your chart that shows the potential for some trigger, it's not necessarily something to be, well, certainly not to be worried about, but maybe just to be mindful of. I wouldn't even say cautious of. I would just say mindful. And there are potentials here, and there are great possibilities as well. And I'm going to break that down. So the main thing is that triple conjunction, which I'm going to talk about. So first, though, let's chant just this one mantra for Ganesh, just to open it up and to open our minds and to steady our minds and to remove any distractions. Om Gang Ganapatiye Namah. Om Gang Ganapatiye Namah. Om Gang Ganapatiye Namah. So a reminder that when I do these forecasts, these general forecasts for patrons, I'll give more details about sign by sign forecasts that I'll do in a couple of days. You'll get that, where I go in more detail for each rising and moon sign. But for the general, forecast, obviously you have to apply it to your own chart. And remember that your circumstances, i.e. your dashas, are more important. In other words, the circumstances that you're in, as well as the location you're in, is going to have a huge say. And the circumstances obviously has the biggest say. Transits, whatever I mentioned here about transits at all for August, isn't the main thing. The main thing is what circumstances you're in. If you're in a cycle of Mars or Rahu, or you're in a cycle of both Mars and Rahu, then yes, definitely pay attention to this triple conjunction of Rahu, Mars, and Uranus. And actually, I think I might share that personally with this as well, because I am, in fact, in a Rahu Mars cycle. And I'm going to share a story of how this has played out for me and how it hasn't always been easy, but how it's also been very productive and very much like a breakthrough that I've had. And, it's a very personal breakthrough, but I'm just going to share the story because it is very apt and it's almost like textbook when you look at my circumstance. So anyway, a reminder, I do sidereal calculations, not the tropical. So the difference you hopefully know between tropical and seasonal versus sidereal celestial. So if you like this video, please hit the like button. If you have any comments, please comment and subscribe so you get notifications. I do this once a month, and then I do other videos like once a month, maybe once every couple of months on more in-depth subjects. And another option is to become a patron. But if you're here live, of course, you're already a patron. So thank you for your support. If you're not already a patron, if you're watching the playback, you can sign up. It's the $5 is the first tier. You can go up to $10 and then ask questions each month by email, or the highest tier, which is actually sold out at the moment, where I mentor people. But you can put your name on a waiting list. I think there are about 2 or 3 people on the waiting list now. So that's more in depth. That's like monthly meetings, 1 hour, one-on-one, and follow-up emails and all of that. But there are spaces for the $5 and $10 tier. And when you sign up, you get a 27-page timeline of your life, basically a report on how to read your dashas, as they're called. And you also get these videos that I put out all the time, these Scorpio Video Club, I call it. And I can just show you the website here. This is the Scorpio Video Club. This is the different tiers. So it's €450 for the lower tier, where you basically get pretty much everything. And then just if you go up to the €9, you also get private questions. So you can email me each month based on either these forecasts or whatever it might be, just a general question or a question about your chart. These things are kind of really good for people who've had readings before, especially this $9 tier, whereas this $450 is maybe for someone who just has a passing interest in astrology and wants to get like daily forecasts and monthly forecasts and all of that. then this is the one that's sold out, but that might become available at some point in the future. So if you want to put your name down for that, you can contact me. And I write, like I said, posts on different subjects. So that's that. Let's get to it, because this is where it's kind of all hinging on. And this triple conjunction of Mars, Uranus, and Rahu, the North Node in Aries, at 24 degrees. Now, Uranus is about to station retrograde also in August, and that means that Uranus is going to start behaving like Rahu, which moves retrograde backwards from our perspective all the time. So Uranus is going to start doing that in close conjunction with Rahu for the rest of the year. And as it does so, it's in a square to Saturn. So we're still having this theme, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, of Uranus and Rahu in Aries, and this need for independence and freedom of movement, and do what we want when we want, and very impulsively take actions, versus the needs of the many and the restrictions and limitations that are imposed upon us by whatever system you can name, whether it's a government, whether it's whatever it might be, an institution. That's Saturn in Capricorn. This is continuing for the rest of the year, but this is the last time, because by the time that we get into next year, Saturn will move on into Aquarius. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about Saturn having returned to Capricorn now and joining Pluto again, and how that's having a huge impact on world affairs, and how it's not as intense as it has been, but it's still coming in with another flavor, yet another virus, for example, in parts of the world, like in New York and San Francisco, where they're literally declaring a health emergency, right? The reason for that is Saturn and Pluto. And I'll just give you an example of Saturn and Pluto. The last time they were together in the sign Libra, sidereal Libra, was the AIDS epidemic. Now Saturn and Pluto are together again. We initially had the COVID pandemic, and now we're having another virus, which is possibly going to turn into an epidemic, because Saturn in Capricorn aspects Libra. So I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But the reason I'm bringing that in here now is because it's squaring this configuration here, which means that we are, as a global nation, not going to take lightly to any kind of restriction moving into the end of this year, into the winter, and another COVID spike, and so on and so on. It's not going to go down well for obvious reasons. We're like done with it now already. We want our freedom, and freedom in Aries. And this Mars, Uranus, Rahu is going to be explosive in so many ways. It has been, it continues to be, it will continue to be after this conjunction. It doesn't just happen on the day itself on the 1st of August. It continues, and Mars continues as it moves on into Taurus, even, because in Taurus, it's aspected by Rahu in Aries. And again, Uranus and Rahu are together for the rest of the year, and Mars is going to stay in Taurus for the rest of the year. So basically, we're having just one thing after another for the rest of the year in terms of energy crisis, supply chains, all of these issues in Taurus. But right now, it's kind of like reached a head where obviously the climate issue, fires and droughts and all of that. And again, all of that in terms of how it restricts us as well, and how we want to kind of break free from our restrictions. Now, you can apply this to your own chart personally, your own life, what's going on for you. But it is quite an intense one, and it doesn't happen often. In fact, this exact conjunction hasn't happened in thousands of years. They have come together, 3 of them together in this place before, 150 or so years ago in 1855 during the Crimean War. So they have been together before in Aries, and that showed the Crimean War. And then fast forward now, when we're having this war again in Ukraine. But the exact conjunction hasn't happened in thousands of years. But again, for you personally, how you're expressing this erratic, impulsive, rash energy might go one of 2 ways. And this is because of this character here, Rahu. So Rahu is all or nothing, and really doesn't know any kind of middle path. It swings wildly from one extreme to the other. So that can mean fear and fearlessness. And you know that yourself in your life, where you're having this fear on some issue and you have this block, and then to overcome the block, you have to push even harder through it, and you have to like almost become fearless. and how that kind of extreme in any kind of action you're taking can lead to problems. But if you're aware of it, of course, and you're aware of this kind of volatility, you can manage it better, especially if you know where Aries is in your chart. So again, I'll go through that sign by sign for patrons, and I have a couple of signs I want to flag here for this recording, but just generally, just know where it is so you know where to kind of be mindful. There are certain signs that need to be more mindful than others, depending on what Mars and Uranus and Rahu, where they are, but also what Mars rules and what Rahu rules. So what signs, in other words, Aries and Scorpio are in your chart, as well as Aquarius, because Rahu rules Aquarius. So again, I'll give examples of this, but generally you just would have to know what these things are to kind of make any statement about your own chart. But general themes I wrote down here, I took some notes, and general themes are about boundaries and restriction, of course, and breaking through boundaries and restrictions, and also breakdowns and breakthroughs, which is a very sort of cliche term, but it's true, you know, and I've had one personally myself in the last couple of weeks where there was like a breakdown, but then a breakthrough. Instability and frustration at the instability, or things not changing quickly enough. Also, that's another maybe indication. And again, fear and fearlessness. Energy is a big thing, and impulsivity is another one. Like if you're acting really rash and impulsively, that's to do with both Uranus and Rahu, with the planet of action, Mars. So of course, in the world, we're seeing really quite frightening situations going on. And when we look at the possibility of things being stirred up now in China, which I don't want to get into the politics so much, but Nancy Pelosi, if she goes to Taiwan, which she is seemingly going to, I mean, she's just going to stir everything up in China, and that's going to kick something off. And I did predict before that whatever happens now is going to stir things up for later. So this is like the trigger. So there's going to be some trigger here that's going to create even more warlike situations on a bigger scale, unfortunately. The other side of it, though, is that there could be some major advancements in tech, major breakthroughs in terms of health and healing. I've seen that in terms of cancer treatments, in terms of all sorts of things. Amazing things happening also. They don't report so much of that on the news because it's just so much of the war going on and all of that, but there's just as many good stories coming out of it. It's just our human tendency, our human nature is just to focus on the negative because it grabs headlines, and it's very easy to kind of focus on those. But there are many good things as well, many advancements. But we just need to be mindful of our energy levels as well, because it could be all over the place with this conjunction. And we need to be mindful as well of fake energy, fake highs, like taking stimulants to get us going because we feel like we're wiped out, or overdoing it and then exhausted, whatever it might be. So anyway, that's the triple conjunction. I'm going to just talk about how it might affect Aries because it's so important, because it's happening in their sign. So if you're Aries rising, especially, or moon sign, Aries rising, of course, that's where it's happening in your life and even in your physicality, if it's your rising sign. If it's your moon sign, it's more about how you're feeling. So that obviously is helpful to know. But for Aries, because Mars rules the 8th house, also Scorpio, and Aquarius is the 11th, while Saturn is also the 10th and 11th, and in the 10th, this is all about work, and it's all about self-expression and energy and how you promote yourself and how you put yourself out there. So if you're Aries rising, there's definitely kind of a breakthrough that's possible here, and maybe acting impulsively and trying to break through some sort of barrier here professionally. There's a lot more to it, but again, I'll go into that more in depth in the sign by sign. For Scorpio, Mars's other sign, and this is my rising sign, by the way. I don't know why I'm sharing so many personal things this time, but like, what the heck? If that's the theme, that's the theme. I'll share a very personal story. For Scorpio, it's more private because it's on the other side of the zodiac to Aries, and so it's more private things. And so for me, it rules the 3rd. Saturn is in the 3rd, ruling the 3rd and 4th, and it's happening in my 6th. And one example is 4th is vehicle as well as home. I've had another breakdown. I bought a car recently. After my other car breaking down, I bought a new car, and that's broken down. And I knew when I was buying the car that this is not good. This is not good. Astrologically, I knew. And what's Rahu? Rahu is like a shady character, you know, a secondhand salesman, right? And because the 4th Lord Rahu is in the 6th, you know, I obviously knew I was going to get stung again, or I had this inkling that maybe I was going to get stung again. And I did all of the steps. I took the car to a garage. I had a mechanic look over it. He said everything was fine. Everything was fine. I'd had it a few months and then it broke down. So there you go. You can't, you can't stop the planets, right? So that's an example for me, but also, in terms of this kind of conflict that I have around this, in terms of the square between my third house and the sixth, communicating this, being clear in communicating, my needs, for example. Now, the other thing, like I said, that's happening at the moment is Saturn is retrograde in Capricorn. It's returned to Capricorn in a square to this triple conjunction. And now Saturn, Mars, and Rahu and Ketu are all impacting Libra. And that's why this is a bit challenging now for this sign too. And again, doesn't mean, it's just Libra rising or moon sign. And wherever you have Libra, it's being challenged right now. Whatever house position Libra is for you, again, remember this is sidereal. This is where you're going to be impacted. Saturn is a square. Mars and Uranus and Rahu are opposite. Ketu is in Libra. So Libra and social life and the economy and diplomacy are severely hampered again. And we're seeing yet another virus rear its head. So that's, anyway, again, the other side of that is a breakthrough that we can have. And I think this is going to be short-lived. That's the good side of this. Whether, it's this particular virus or, any further restrictions over the autumn and winter, it will be short-lived. It will move on in the new year. So whatever happens in the next few months, don't worry about it, because it is going to move on next year and things are going to change in a big way. So it's kind of like the last push in a way. So this is the other thing to mention, is that Rahu is in Aries, remember, Ketu in Libra, in sidereal signs, Aries, Libra, but they're in the 9th division. If we divide the signs into 9 segments of 3 degrees, 20 minutes each, we have this whole other chart called the 9th division, or Navamsha in Indian astrology. It's the most important division. It shows the underlying support in the chart. And the nodes are not supported at all at the moment, because Rahu is currently in Scorpio in this 9th division, and Ketu is in Taurus, and that's where they are at their weakest. So what Rahu does in Scorpio is it catastrophizes, and it's like doom scrolling, looking at all of these things that are happening in the world and just getting into lots of fear and fear mongering. And Ketu in Taurus is removing all of the basics, all of the supports. And that has been happening, and it will continue to happen until August 17th. So until this moves on, there's an underlying sense of instability in the world, basically right now, an underlying fear. So that's where that's coming from. So at least that's moving on. Another thing that's moving on is that Mars will then quickly move out of Aries after it conjoins on the 1st of August with those planets, and it will move into Taurus. Now, but the thing about that is that Mars will stay in Taurus for 6 months. It normally only stays in the sign for a couple of months. It's going to stay in 6 months. It won't move out until next March. It will briefly move out into Gemini between the 15th of October and the 13th of November, just for a month. And it will station on the 30th of October and move back into Taurus. So between now, August, and March next year, you better get used to Taurus, Mars and Taurus, and what that means for you, because it's going to be a big theme moving forward. In the word, like I said, it's going to be issues around supply chains and famine and food and all of those things that Taurus represent, the basics. And because Mars is going to be retrograde, there's going to have to be a lot of reshuffling of things around the world to make everything work, and have to rework things and redo things and reroute supply chains. Mars retrograde. For you personally, again, know where Taurus is, because that's where you're going to be focusing a lot of your energy. But because Mars will be retrograde for the last few months of the year, October, the end of October, so November, December, and January, then just a heads up, because that's where you'll be really focusing all your energy. But then because it's retrograde, the energy isn't very clear. It's not efficient and coming out very clearly. And so you have to redo things all the time, and you have to kind of rethink things in that area of your life. And so energy and all of that, and energy, literally energy supply over the winter, is going to be a huge issue. And you don't need an astrologer to tell you that. But that's what the astrology is saying. Energy crisis this winter, basically. But again, know where this is in your chart, because you're going to be focused a lot on that part of the chart. The other thing that's happening in the background, there's a lot happening this month, as you can see. Jupiter is now retrograde. It has just stationed retrograde in Pisces. And so although Jupiter in Pisces, there is a general sense of hope despite all the things that are happening. There is also the inflation, which Jupiter is conjunct Neptune, and that's showing the inflation. And now it's retrograde with Neptune and Pisces, and that may be that readjustment of, inflationary trends with Saturn aspecting it, looking at it, showing really a recession. Now, it's interesting that they haven't called it a recession yet, and they're actually rejigging how they define recession. And by that's itself interesting that Jupiter is now retrograde. It's going back over something, and they've literally gone back over and said, oh, actually, we won't call this a recession because of this, this, and this. Now we'll reframe this, and so it's not a recession as yet. That is one interesting expression of this. But at the end of the day, there is this kind of need for a recession, really, because of the inflation, which continues because of Jupiter and Neptune in Pisces. So Jupiter continues to retrograde until the end of the year, November 23rd. And in your own chart, be mindful of that, because now it's more beneficial to look back for opportunities in this area of your life, wherever, again, Pisces is by house position. So wherever it is, look at that area and look back. Go back to something, reconnect with someone or something that can help you move forward again. So that's Jupiter retrograde. Some more practical, down-to-earth news for August is Mercury, because it's about to move into Virgo. Now, this is Mercury's best place. So from August 20th until October 26th, again, a long transit. It normally only stays a few weeks, but it's going to station retrograde in September. So more about that next month, but it means it's going to stay longer, and it's going to really focus us on Virgo type themes in terms of getting it right, planning and scheduling and all of that, ordering our life and managing things, and maybe micromanaging for a while. But apart from the retrograde itself, from the 10th of September to the 3rd of October, this whole period of Mercury in Virgo is more practical, and it is good and more efficient for planning our life. Apart from the retrograde, which is going to be very disorderly in many ways and very creative in many ways also, this is a great time to start scheduling. And it's not unusual to have Mercury in Virgo anyway in the autumn, and that's why autumn time is such a great time to plan and to get our schedule and our diaries in order and everything working better and improve our lot. That's really the theme of autumn anyway. Then the moon phases, which are also important to look at. The full moon in the middle of the month, and then the end of the month, another new moon. So the full moon is in Dhanishta, and that bridges Capricorn and Aquarius. And the new moon is in Magha, which is in Leo on the 27th. So I'll just show you those here. These are the two moons. This is the full moon, North and South Indian style charts. So you have the full moon here at 25 degrees of Capricorn, very closely conjunct Saturn. Again, all of the Saturn themes are going to be very relevant now. And because the moon is going to be in a square to the nodes, almost exactly, and conjunct Saturn, this theme here is going to be a big one of, again, the theme of our need for freedom and movement and any kind of restrictions that are seemingly coming to into our awareness again, into our lives. So we just need to be mindful of being patient around this time, more especially because Saturn is opposite the sun. And this happens every year. But when Saturn is in Capricorn and very powerful, and it's with Pluto, although a really wide orb, they're in the same sign. And so this kind of creates this kind of restriction in some ways. So we're going to see more and more restriction, unfortunately, in August. And again, remember, it's going to be short-lived this time, but any kind of restriction is not going to be met with any kind of enthusiasm, of course. So this full moon is definitely a kind of time to kind of stick with it and be more restrained and patient, I would say. So that's the full moon, the middle of the month. And then at the end of the month, we have a new moon starting things off again. And that is in Leo, sidereal Leo. Remember, this is in the lunar mansion Magha, at the beginning of Leo, which is all about power, how we use power, how we strategize and plan, And when we add the fact that Mercury is in Virgo and it's all about management, then obviously this end of August is, as we're ending the summer, a time to really start strategizing for the next few months, planning ahead, realizing that we will have to backtrack on many things, because once Mercury goes retrograde in September into October, we'll be reviewing our plans, but we do have to plan at this, we will be planning at this time. And so this is a great time to do that. It's moving out of the way the sun is now moved out of its opposition to Saturn. It does move into an aspect from the node, Rahu and Mars. So there's this need to kind of push things ahead now as well. So you might get the sense by the end of August of having to push things forward and restart things. So that's more positive in many ways. Again, as long as you're mindful of the need to kind of review later on. And that's always the case, by the way, when we see these kinds of things in the chart and we sense it in our lives, where we know that it's a great time for planning. Autumn time is usually anyway, but we know that whatever we plan, we have to fine tune later on. That's always the case. So that's the new moon. I want to finish here just before I get into any questions for those who are here live, and maybe go through the month with the charts in more detail. Just the last call for submissions, because this is the very last call, because the deadline is the 1st of September for the magazine, which I'm really excited about this time. This is the magazine for 2023. This is the 5th edition, and I'm excited about this one because it's all about dashes and cycles. And so I already have a couple of astrologers, really well-known and great astrologers, submit articles. I'm still looking for more, but what I'm more interested in, and if you're listening to this and interested in sharing something, I'm interested in hearing about those who have a story to tell. So whether it's you want to just tell a brief story, a little snippet, or a longer story about your experience of a dasha, a time cycle, a planetary cycle or a sign-based cycle, whatever it might be, however in-depth or however superficial you want to go with it, whatever you're comfortable with sharing. I'm planning on having this section in the magazine called Tell Your Story. And it's a way of sharing our experience of the planetary cycles. You can go to the website if you want more details here, where you'll see just the details about what we're looking for in terms of, it could be even a piece of poetry, could be a piece of art, photography even, it could be anything, painting, a short story, an article, whatever it might be. If you are writing articles, there are some guidelines here about if you are sharing any data in terms of charts. And this is the sourcing data is important in terms of this Rodden rating, it's called. Lois Rodden was the lady who came up with this system. And basically we have this system where we collect birth times and so on. So if you are sharing a chart of somebody, a well-known person, a celebrity or something, whatever it might be, then you have to use this system. But anyway, it's all there on the website. And that is it for this month. Okay, so I wish everybody who's listening back to this playback a great month. Despite what it might seem that it's highly volatile, it certainly is. But what I've often noticed in astrology and these kinds of configurations, when they come to a head, it's almost like an afterthought. It's almost like an aftershock, that the thing that's was going to happen has probably already happened in the lead up to it. Because at some point in the lead up to these conjunctions, you're probably, going to have experienced a Mars or a Rahu cycle on some level, because we break it down to many levels, down to the minute. So you probably already had the thing happen. So don't worry about it, right? Don't be worrying about the 1st of August as the day that everything happens, right? So if you have had something happen, then that is how you experience it. But in the world, we're likely to see this in many, many different ways over many months, and in fact, for many years, because in a way, and in our lives too, when something happens, we're forever changed. And this is going to forever change us. And that's a big statement, I know, but yeah, there you go. It's going to change us forevermore. The world is not going to be the same again after this whole period, after this year. And this is kind of like the pivot in the year. So anyway, I'll leave it there for now, and I'll take questions from those who are here live, and I'll see you all next time.